Good evening, everyone. We hope you're all doing well. We have an incredible program this evening, so we are going to get started with some announcements and introduction, and then we're going to move right into our program. Thank you for joining us. We know that people are still coming into the waiting room, but we are so excited about tonight's session of Bray School Stories that we really want to get started. My name is Maureen Elgersman Lee, and I am the director of the Williamsburg Bray School Lab. Unfortunately, Elizabeth Drembus is not able to be with us this evening, but she, like me, is very excited for you to hear our speaker this evening. In service to the Bray School Lab's mission of uncovering, documenting, preserving, and disseminating broadly the history and legacies of the Williamsburg Bray School and its students, we host a monthly Zoom series in order to share genealogical findings, engage with the descendant community, in order to broaden our understanding of the legacies, enlist the help of historians, genealogists, the general public, and furthering the conversations and the research surrounding the Williamsburg Bray School, 1760 to 1774. The title of the series, as you know, is Bray School Stories. This evening's focus is Seeking Hannah, Sarah, and Squire. Some quick housekeeping reminders. This session is recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you may view this recording when it's made available on our YouTube channel. You can simply Google Bray School Lab YouTube, and the most recent as well as prior recorded sessions will be there. You can also choose to stay on and simply turn your camera off or your video off so you can still participate, but with some more anonymity. And again, we expect that this recording will be available simply in a matter of days. We're really good at turning this around. I'm really excited to be joined this evening, standing in again for Elizabeth Drembus, to welcome Tyler Lewis. Tyler is working with the Bray School Lab this summer as part of the CHIP internship program. He started 7 weeks ago, and we are so excited that he's going to share this work with you. Our monthly series are designed to spark conversation, and Tyler's presentation is certainly going to do that. It's broken into 3 segments, and he will share findings concerning each of the students, and he's happy to take questions at the end of each segment, and we also look forward to reserving some time at the end for questions that may arise as the program continues. So let's get started with a little bit of promotion of things that are coming up. I'm going to share my screen very quickly. So of course, Bray School Stories, Seeking Hannah, Sarah, and Squire. We invite you to, as always, visit our website, wm.edu/Bray Lab. But coming up, we have One Question With. It is the Strategic Cultural Partnerships, or as we like to say, SCP podcast. We get fun and interesting people coming through our doors, and our SCP colleagues take the opportunity to sit down with them and ask questions. Again, it's called One Question With. It drops the first Friday of the month, so just in a few days, the August 2025 One Question With will drop, and that is with something of a legend, I think, at Williamsburg, Charles Fulcher, who you know for his incredible knowledge of the history of the Wren Building and the early history of William and Mary in particular. He is the Director of Operations and Events at the historic Wren Building. I think you'll enjoy that. And then also coming up, James Monroe's Highland in Charlottesville. That's James Monroe Parkway, 2050 James Monroe's Parkway in Charlottesville. We'll be hosting the VA 250 Mobile Museum. This is part of the VA 250 Commonwealth-wide commemoration of the soon-to-be 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and also the Road to Revolution. This visitation, this opportunity is free and open to the public, and it'll be available Thursday, July 31st through Saturday, August 2nd, from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Again, free and open to the public, hands-on, interactive, and immersive museum on wheels. The VA 250 Mobile Museum is traveling throughout Virginia as part of the Out of Many One experience, and it brings key stories of Virginia's rich history to schools, museums, fairs, and other locales, highlighting every region of the state. It's now particularly my pleasure, stop sharing. It's now my pleasure to welcome Tyler Lewis. Tyler is a rising senior and history anthropology double major at William and Mary. He has had previous experience conducting genealogical research on enslaved communities for the Valentine Museum in Richmond and within his own family research with counties across Southside and Tidewater, Virginia, and the Carolinas. Tyler is also slated to continue his research on Hannah, Sarah, and Squire for the upcoming fall semester in the National Institute of American History and Democracy, also known as NIAD, Public History Internship Program. Tyler, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Elgersman Lee said, I'm Tyler Lewis, and I will discuss Hannah, Sarah, and Squire's stories today. I need to share the screen as being a bit haywire at the moment. Okay. Just a heads up, I slightly modified, I guess, the itinerary for the students to discuss. I will discuss Squire's story first because both his paper trail and his narrative is the most straightforward out of the three. Okay. But before we discuss the students, we must discuss the attendance list. We first see Hannah, who attended the school first in 1762 in the Robert Carr Nicholas household. She was about 7 years old then. Next, we see on these two slides, see Squire, who attended in 1765 under Philip Johnson. And then we see Sarah in 1769, who attended as another student of Robert Carter Nicholas. And before I discuss Squire, I would like to give some little bit of background information on Philip Johnson. His most notable, I guess, role for this presentation is his tenure of the James City Committee of Safety during the Revolution as a form of the Committee of Safeties were local government branches that served on the local level after the dissolution of the colonial government in 1775. Most important to Squire's story is that Johnson owned vast lands across King and Queen, King William, and James City counties, but mainly focusing on his possessions in James City, because that is where Squire and his community lived on. Okay. I also need to discuss Johnson's family tree, mainly because this provides more context within the records to show where Squire or other members of his community ended up. As you see, Johnson has children from his first wife. And you may see this Bray name and think that it's related to Dr. Thomas Bray. They are not connected. They're from different parts of England. Then we have Johnson's children from his second wife, Martha. For this presentation, Catherine Johnson and Sarah Johnson are the most important because they became some of the possible enslavers for Squire after Johnson's death. And I'd also like to provide some more background information on Johnson's enslaved communities. Mainly, this slide is to mainly show what Squire and other members of his community were up against. As we see, Philip Johnson, throughout the 1760s and 1770s, Johnson was heavily in debt, and he had to raise money by often hiring out or selling his enslaved community. You see right here. I show these examples just to show the different places and different people that these enslaved people were hired out to. As we can see, King William Courthouse, we see a cook named Amy who was hired out to William and Mary. And for this slave cell right here, we see it in Rocky Ridge, which is modern day Manchester and Richmond South Side. And here are some more examples. Show some right. We see Westover in Charles City County, New Kent County, and King William County in this legal document paper right here. And here's just also another advertisement in the Virginia Gazette about Johnson hiring out his enslaved community. And here's just to put into perspective the different counties where Johnson's enslaved community ended up. I think this is important to important to highlight, because Squire had to deal with his relatives and other members of his community being hired out and being sold yearly across these different counties. Okay. And I have the slide right here to showcase that I mainly worked on making a spreadsheet to track Johnson's enslaved community. Excuse me. Sorry, it's right here. I made the spreadsheet in place of a will because we've yet to find Philip Johnson's will, but I thought it would be important to just record all the names, all the individuals that Philip Johnson enslaved, because these people are more than just names on a spreadsheet. They're members of Squire's community, and I feel it is in my best interest to highlight them, and also just we do not know if these are possible relatives of Squire who could have been sold or hired out miles and miles away. I'm going back to the main presentation. And so for Squire in the records, as shown earlier, we saw him in the attendance list for 1765. In 1768, he's listed in a schedule of all of Johnson's enslaved people at Vaux Hall, which was his main residence, as we see right here. Below, we see him in tax records, which, in the 1780s and the 1790s, we mainly see Squire in the tax records. And as you can see, most of the records that I had on Squire were tax records that were recorded annually to state that he was in the Johnson household or he was enslaved by his children. And I would just like to put in perspective that in 1768, Philip Johnson enslaved 178 people. By the time he died in 1789, he only enslaved 11 people. And Squire was one of these 11. And that aspect just makes me wonder, what made Philip Johnson never sell Squire, and what made him keep him within the family after he died? Was it the assigned task he had to do? Did he simply have a high level of trust with Squire or something like that? Or could he have been a member of the Johnson family? There are so many questions and possibilities to consider. And here's just a summary of the previous slides with this timeline. Unfortunately, I could not find an exact age or a vital record for Squire, but because the Bray School students were between the ages of 3 and 10 years old, we can say that he must have been born between 1755 and 1766. And at the end of the timeline in 1792, he would be at the youngest 30, at the oldest 37. And unfortunately, it is possible that he could have had a family by this time. The records don't seem to clearly indicate that, but I'm not eliminating that possibility that in the other tax records, the children listed in the tax records could have been his children. It is currently unclear where Squire is in the 1793 James City titleable records, mainly because the Williamsburg portion of the titleable list where Richard Lester, who enslaved him the previous year, lived at, they do not list the names of the enslaved. We just see this number. It shows that he enslaved one other person. Squire could possibly be the person in the Lester household in 1793, but it's also possible that he could have been with somewhere else. And we also see in that same tax record, the James City portion does list the names of the enslaved, as we can see with That's her sister-in-law, Katherine Johnson. We see her listed with 5 enslaved people. The reason why I am fixating on Katherine Johnson and Sarah and Richard Lester is because those individuals are where Philip Johnson's 11 enslaved people were bequeathed to him. As mentioned on the slide, we've checked other squires in the 1793 tax titleable list, but those are completely different squires because they were with those enslavers in prior tax records. And here are some records that I've used to try to track squire. The bold, the records in bold are places that we have found squire. The others are just areas that I've considered. This is mainly tracking the enslaving families movement or other areas where the trustees have lived in. And I mainly just have this slide to show that Squire's story and the other Bray School scholars too, their stories extend far beyond Williamsburg, and we have to keep all of our bases in check to ensure that we're able to tell their stories. Here's some research challenges. The main challenge for Squire and the Johnson family were record loss. This is mainly because the Johnson family stayed within James City, Williamsburg area. Most of the James City court records, most James City and Williamsburg court records prior to 1865 were destroyed in numerous courthouse fires. And as we see, and these images on the right are from Johnson's legal papers. They had his will, but as we can see here, it was torn out. And this is just, I show this just to showcase the challenges that we have to deal with, because we could have possibly seen exactly who Squire was bequeathed to in this will. As we can see, it's talking about bequeathing an item in this image. And then this next image, it talks about executors and him and Johnson bequeathing something to his grandson. But then we've also had to distinguish between 3 different squires that Philip Johnson had owned. We see on top right here, the squire who I believe to be the Bray School student at Fall Hall. We see a lady squire who was hired out to William Byrd and Western Plantation in Charles City. And we also see an old squire who was also at Fall Hall, all in the same year of 1768. We mainly, I distinguish, I believe that the squire at the top image is the Bray School Scholar. This is mainly because we only see one squire in future tax records in the 1780s and the 1790s. The Bray School student is certainly too young to be old squire. And if squire happened to be a woman or a girl, the same page would have had this parentheses after him on this page as well, because these 2 entries are only a page apart. And there are other enslaved individuals listed on the same page as the Bray School Squire that do have parentheses woman. I'm sorry that you all cannot really see it. It does say woman, but this paper was very fragile. And that was just the process of elimination that I had to go through to determine which squire is the Bray School student. Oops, are there any questions on Squire? Or are there any slides that you would like me to return to?
If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question directly. All right, nothing yet. We know that sometimes when we have all the information put together, that it stimulates questions. So we can continue on if there are no questions about Squire specifically at this time.
Okay. Before I discuss Hannah and Sarah, I also want to give some background information on Robert Carter Nicholas. The information that is most important to us is that Nicholas was the trustee of the Williamsburg Bray School from its opening in 1760 to its closure in 1774. Now, he also owned vast lands across numerous counties, as shown in the slide. Part of the research for tracking Hannah and Sarah was trying to pinpoint Nicholas's enslaved communities throughout each of these different counties. And there's some more information on the family tree. There's a lot of information of all these children and all these spouses, but for Hannah and Sarah's stories, we're mainly focusing on Wilson Carey Nicholas, and then Louis Valentine and Philip Naborn Nicholas. And with some more information on Nicholas's enslaved communities, Nicholas often hired out and rotated people amongst his numerous plantations across. He rotated and hired out people across his vast possessions. We often see that Nicholas was very paternalistic with how he treated and viewed his enslaved community. As we can see in this runaway ad, we see him highlight his moral posturing of being a benevolent slaveholder and fearing the cruelty of the overseers. But we also see he's the one who, in George's case, he imports George from Africa. And he's the one who hires the overseers despite worrying about their cruelty. And we also see his land speculation efforts in Albemarle and also in Henrico County, while he's still sending children to the Williamsburg Bray School. And also, I've attached this letter that he sent to John Norton, where he states that due to floods causing a poor harvest, he had to look for more lands to speculate in western counties to move his enslaved community on to create more plantations. We also see that mainly for both Hannah and Sarah, he sought to distinguish Bray School students, but also he sought to create a hierarchy amongst his enslaved community. Those who were often in the house and possibly Bray School students, they were at the top of the hierarchy. You had those in the middle who had some type of skill. This would be for men, they would often be blacksmiths or carpenters. And for women, they would be spinners and weavers. And at the bottom would be enslaved people who worked in the fields. Obviously, for Hannah and the records, I wish I could have found more about Hannah, but she remained very elusive within the records, unfortunately. As presented earlier, we see Hannah was in the Bray School attendance list in 1762. In 1765, Robert Carter Nicholas lamented to Reverend John Warning, one of the Bray trustees in England, about how he sent Hannah to the Bray School and that she deviated from the path that he would have wanted her to be on. We see Nicholas's paternal and controlling atmosphere, or controlling mechanisms to try to manipulate Hannah to be the person that he wants her to be. I do not know the full context of it, but we can see that he's clearly upset that Hannah has seemingly became a sad jade, but at least how I interpreted it, Hannah just sought to define herself within her own way, and then Nicholas is just upset that he could not control her. And enslavers controlling the enslaved is everything in a slave-based society, as Virginia gradually solidified that status. And I also think that Hannah might have possibly been with Robert Carter Nicholas' son, Wilson Carey Nicholas, in 1783, where this record shows that he sold 31 people. The reason why I gravitate towards this Hannah being a possible candidate as the Bray School Scholar is mainly because I've looked through Wilson Carey's papers in the 19th century, in which none of these people who are on this list, so none of these names that appeared on this list are familiar to me. And these are most likely people that Wilson Carey inherited from his father. Some possible theories for Hannah. The process of elimination, Hannah was most likely in Albemarle County by the time of Robert Carter Nicholas's death. This is mainly because I did not see it listed in any tax or court records in the other areas where the Nicholas family owned land and enslaved people, in which as stated in the last slide, Wilson Carey Nicholas also enslaved a Hannah in 1793, and she could have also appeared in his list of enslaved people in 1787. Unfortunately, Mrs. Drembus and I do not have access to the original records for these two lists. This is mainly because the UVA special collections, they have the records, but this finding aid shown on the right does not match the way that this collection is organized, fortunately. But Mrs. Drembus plans to visit UVA in August to get this all set up. But it could have been, but Hannah could have been possibly bequeathed to one of the Nicholas daughters as a deed of gift in their marriages, in which this free Negro description in 1840 just has an example of an enslaved person, a formerly enslaved person freed by Edmund Randolph, who is from a Nicholas, whose family is from a Nicholas household. So are there any questions for Hannah at this moment?
We have a question in the chat.
Sure.
The question is from Jeanette Gordon Weaver. What does the term sad Jane mean in the 18th century? Does it mean actual sadness or just not behaving as Robert Carter Nicholas would have wished? Would gratitude have been expected?
Definitely. At least that was my interpretation of it. It's just that Nicholas just viewed her in some way as being too wicked for his ways. I guess maybe he sensed some type of betrayal or something. Maybe he just expected her to act like she did in school. Maybe she was doing, at least to him, she seemed to be this good student in school, but as soon as she left the school, she changed in his mindset. But I'm not completely sure about that. But at least from what my interpretation of Sat Jade is that he saw her as clearly deviating from how he wanted her to act. If that makes any sense, Ms. Janet.
And there's a follow-up question. Was Robert Carter Nicholas related to the owners of the Shirley plantation?
Yeah, of the Carters, yes, he is Robert King Carter's grandson. So yes, he is related to the Carters, both of Shirley, but also of Carter's Grove, and through through his daughter's marriage, he's also related to the Randolph family too.
Thank you for that clarification, Tyler.
Shall we move on to Sarah, or are there any more questions regarding Hannah? And as I said earlier, I wish I could have found more about her in the records, but it's just due to the nature of the lack of proper accounting, well, not proper accounting, but the lack of easily accessible accounting of Nicholas's enslaved community in Albemarle County. This is all I had to go off from, unfortunately.
There are more questions in the chat, so we can continue on to Sarah.
Okay. And for Sarah is a unique case because out of 3 students, we do have a vital record for her. She was baptized in Bruton Parish Church on October 7th, 1764. We also see that her mother's name is Lucy. As shown earlier, she was in the Bray School in 1769. We also see her in the 1780s at Nicholas's plantation in Henrico called West Ham. These records come from a legal dispute between the Nicholas and Ambler families, who they jointly owned the property and the enslaved people, and just that we see the enslaved at West Ham in legal limbo because the land and the enslaved people, and the enslaved community are literally divided in half between these 2 families. And this is also the only account of Sarah that I saw in the Henrico records. The Sarah's family unit, going to the Bruton baptism records and the Henrico County tax records, we see that Sarah's mother's name is Lucy, and she has a younger brother named Caesar. We have his baptism record right here. This is Caesar, son of Lucy. He was baptized on August 2nd, 1767. And I have a possible theory that Nicholas tried to separate Sarah from her community, as we see. As we see in the tax records at West Ham, we see her brother and her mother, Lucy and Caesar, but we do not see Sarah in this tax record. But we do see her in the court records, despite them occurring in the same year. I think this is what Nicholas tried to emphasize this more with Sarah, to try to treat the Bray School students differently, and just we could only imagine what it was like for her, not only being not only being classified legally. Excuse me, to put some preface on that, in the tax records. So in this tax record right here, we only see those who belong to the estate, but in the court records, we see the enslaved community, they're enslaved by Robert Carr Nicholas's younger two sons, Louis and Philip. So we see Sarah not only being classified legally from her task, because in the tax records, the estate only recorded the titleables for those who were in the fields. I assume that Sarah would have been in the house, because she's listed with the two sons, and as the will emphasized, which will be shown later, Robert Carr Nicholas's will, he wanted to distinguish between those who were enslaved at the house and those who were enslaved at the fields for all of his properties, including his land in Henrico County. He's only imagined just not only being legally distinguished from your family, but also being separated in terms of working in different areas of the same property. Here's just some more information about the will. This slide is only really show to prove why I think that Sarah might have been in the house while her mother and brother could have been in the fields, mainly because in this clause, where Nicholas emphasizes that his enslaved community in West Ham, that those who labored in the fields and in the gardens, they would be enslaved by the estate, whereas those who were housekeepers, as he states, they were to be bequeathed to his two youngest sons, who would inherit his land in Henrico County. As I said earlier, the only enslaved individuals who are named in the will by name are those who were in the house, and we have some who were carpenters or who were blacksmiths. All the field laborers, they were given to each sons as portions of land. As you see in the second image, we see the only individuals who were named were those in the house, as they were called, cooks or maids or waiting boys or waiting men, occupations like that. And also the will presents a challenge to us, is that Robert Carr Nicholas, he did not want his inventory appraised, so we do not know how many people he owned across the various counties. We do not know why he specifically requested for him not to have an inventory appraisal. Could he be hiding something? That is possible. Did he just simply did not want to rectify with how many people he enslaved? That could be another possibility. And that just also just presents another challenge for us. And similar to the Johnson spreadsheet, I made a spreadsheet for the Nicholas family too. I just have this slide here just to showcase how in place of his inventory, I scoured through various types of records to document the enslaved people that Nicholas did enslave, so that I could keep track of Hannah and Sarah's possible relatives and other members of their community. Also had to also recorded the enslaved communities for each of his children, just to keep all of our bases in check, just in case if they had families, they were separated between the Nicholas children. Okay. Here's some possible theories I have for Sarah. Because she was legally split between the two youngest sons, she could have gone with either one of them. So I researched their enslaved community too, just to make the necessary precautions. We do see that Lewis and Philip Nicholas, they still owned land in Henrico County as per in 1791 until 1812, which Sarah could have possibly been one of the 17 people who were enslaved there. But after 1812, Lewis Nicholas, Lewis Nicholas has sold his property in Henrico, and she could have gone with him, as we see other individuals who were enslaved in Henrico with him, with the example image right here. So recognize similar names, and also in this image right here. The reason why I discuss this is because for the Nicholas family, they often group the enslaved people. So they often organize enslaved people through groups of people who are from a specific location, and in place of and using that using that, I believe that's where I could possibly locate where either of the two are, especially for Sarah. Unfortunately, I did not find her with Lewis in this long court case, but there is always a possibility that she was at one point within his household. I also see another Sarah who was enslaved by their brother, Wilson Carey Nicholas, who he sold to his son-in-law in Baltimore. It's just that reason why I highlight these possibilities is that, especially with the slaveholding family, so we have to check all of our bases, and we have to look at the patterns within, not only to see if we can find Hannah or Sarah, but also the people who they might have worked alongside, they might have worshipped alongside, they might have started families alongside, to see if we could try to find them, or possibly other people who related to them at that specific location. That makes any sense. And here's just this timeline just summarizes the previous slides. We see Sarah and her brother's birth, see her in the Williamsburg Bray School. I've also included some other important events in Nicholas' family, because that also impacted the dispersal of the enslaved community throughout the various properties. Okay. And I would also like to highlight the University of Richmond's Burial Ground Memorial, which that serves to honor Lucy, Sarah, and Caesar, as well as the other enslaved people who labored at West Ham throughout its tenured history. West Ham Plantation is now a part of the college, University of Richmond's West Hampton campus, which was the first college they integrated for women in the 1910s. I don't think that they were buried at the plantation, buried at West Ham, but I do like how this monument serves to honor them and the other members of Nicholas's enslaved community who were at West Ham. And then this monument is brand new. The University of Richmond just made it this year. I highly recommend to go and see it. Here's just some more images right here. We see Sarah, Lucy, and Caesar listed as members, as people who were enslaved at West Ham, who are honored the memorial on the website. And here's just another image of the memorial. The reason why I always emphasize Sarah, Lucy, and Caesar is because they were always grouped together in all the records and in all of the lists at West Ham. Those three were always together. Okay. Here's just some map to put into perspective, see where Hannah and Sarah have gone. We see Hannah going straight from James City to Albemarle. She could have stopped in Hanover, or she could have stopped in Henrico, but at least from what the records, at least from what I have found in the records, I've just only seen her in James City, the Williamsburg Bray School, and her possibly in Albemarle County. You see for Sarah, we see her stopping at West Ham and Henrico, and depending on which brother enslaved her, she could have stayed in Richmond with Philip Nicholas, but she could have also at one point gone to Albemarle with Lewis Nicholas. Okay. Similarly with Squire and his enslaved community at the Philip Johnson household, I just have these maps here to show how the Bray School and their Bray School students and their stories stretch way beyond Williamsburg or the Tidewater area. And here are some records just to find either of the two. I just have this slide just to showcase, again, how the paper trail takes us far beyond Williamsburg. all these different counties we have to look at, and the entries in bold represent where I have found either of them. We also had to work with numerous other institutions, not only to gain access to some materials, but to ask for some clarification on certain things, especially for West Ham. The University of Richmond are very generous with providing us information about West Ham and the treatment of enslaved people there. There were some research challenges. Record loss was another major factor. It was not as significant as for the Johnson family. As I stated earlier, the Nicholas family spread more inward. But we were still limited with the amount of records that we could see, especially for colonial era records recording enslaved people in Hanover and Albemarle counties. And as we see, we see another challenge within the personal property tax records. There are some counties like Williamsburg and James City who initially record the names of the enslaved in documents in the 1780s, but some counties like Albemarle never record names of the enslaved. As you can see in this image right here, in 1782, the Robert Carr Nicholas estate enslaved 120 people, and Hannah was possibly one of those 120 people. So what's next? Mainly for Squire, there are a collection of York County title records that are separate from the personal property tax records from 1791 to 1801 that are at the Library of Virginia. We would have to coordinate a visit, and because these records are in their warehouse. For Hannah, is mainly looking through any personal papers of Nicholas' family, which that's where those lists came from in 1787 and 1793. Then for Sarah, same thing for her. But if she stayed in Richmond, this is a task for me to do, is to make an appointment at the Virginia Baptist Historical Society to see if she's possibly a member of First Baptist Church or First African Baptist Church in Richmond. So now, are there any questions for Hannah or Sarah or either of the three?
Before we go on to questions, Tyler, just thank you for your incredibly diligent and professional research and delivery. Very, very dense. What most people haven't seen, some of us have been privy to, just the behind the scenes visits to different repositories, poring over documents, conferring with Elizabeth and other people connected to the research, ongoing research. But just first of all, thank you for what you presented for us this evening. I'm going to go back in the chat. There are a number of questions, and I'm just going to pick up where we left off. All right.
Okay.
Can you take just a moment to clarify the Nicholas and Ambler families, and so people can kind of understand what was happening and why these two families are kind of locked in that, just a little more in reference to that.
Would you like me to go back to the slides
If you'd
with
like.
the court documents?
Yep, if you'd like.
Okay. While I'm doing that, about West Ham, it was just mainly, it was purely a business venture between the two families. They both, Robert Carr Nicholas and Edward Ambler, made an agreement in 1765 to jointly own the land and property, well, and enslaved people, for 20 years. There was a whole legal case between the two families over the amount of enslaved people that were there because the Ambler family felt cheated, I guess, from the profits that the Nicholas family were receiving for it, because the Nicholas family shoveled people between Henrico, Hanover, and Albemarle, and West Ham. So we see people who might have been in Albemarle in 1 year, at West Ham 1 year. Because in the court records, excuse me, because per the agreement, they were supposed to have 30 people, a 30 person limit for those who were enslaved at West Ham. The court records indicated that the Nicholas family had up to 130 people there at one point. So yeah, it's just that there's this whole legal case, and they had to section off both the land and the enslaved people, which is why you may see on this tax record that there's more people listed on here than in the court record, because this community was literally divided in half between the two families. And it was just they later, to me, after the case was resolved in 1788, the Nicholas family sold the property in 1791 to John Harvey of Richmond. And then after that, it had a slew of other owners until it was owned by the grandfounder of the True Reformers before U of R owned it, which I find that really interesting because that's one of Richmond's largest Black mutual aid societies. To see that history, to see it once formerly a plantation as a site of Black capital and Black development is interesting. But yeah. Sorry, I'm going too much of a tangent on there. But just for Hannah and for Sarah, it was just mainly owned between those two families. They had disagreement and then they divided up the land and people.
Thank you, Tyler. I think what your presentation also did was show how very vulnerable enslaved persons were to not simply their enslavers, but also their relationship with the land. As chattel, they were personal movable property, which is clearly different than real property or real estate. And they were very much subject to any number of factors and conditions that would move them further and further away from Williamsburg. I'm going to move on. Next question is, do you know how Robert Carter Nicholas chose who would be baptized? Any sense of that? What went into the selection process?
Surprisingly, even though he was a vestryman of Bruton Parish Church, he didn't baptize many of his enslaved people. I'll go back to my spreadsheet to show all the people who he did baptize. It's right here. Especially compared to Philip Johnson, he only baptized these people listed right here. I'm not sure why he baptized so little of his enslaved community. I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he just thought that they were special or something. I'm not sure, but I wish I knew. Um, from what I've seen so far, is that the only people who to me I didn't see Hannah's baptism record. I've yet to find that if it is still available. We do see other people here too. These other people, these other children, they were not Bray School students, unfortunately. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure what went into Nicholas's process of baptizing people, unfortunately.
To that, there's another question. Is there a pattern of other enslavers sending those who worked in the house to the Bray School? Do you know of any pattern? Were you able to discern anything in your research?
I don't really know the other students very well, but I would assume that, well, not assume, but I wouldn't be surprised if some other enslavers treated the Bray School students with a special status compared to their other enslaved people. They thought assuming that those specific students should have the privilege of receiving an education, of learning literacy and things like that. But I'm not sure if this is a pattern with the other enslaving households that they were necessarily house servants. And I know that for Isaac B, I'm not sure if he was a house servant or not, but I do know that he was also was a Bray School student, but he was also working in the fields at one point in Mecklenburg County.
Great. Great
So
job, excellent work, great presentation, well done. Keep scrolling through. Any other questions? Again, you can put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask it directly. I think I've covered every question in the chat, trying to keep up. If there is something that's been missed or if there's a deeper question relative to what's already been asked, please feel free to enter the question or again, ask it directly. And again, lots of celebratory comments for you, Tyler.
thank you.
Anything, Tyler, that you want to add on to relative to your slides? We have three people, so there could be more content that you might want to speak to.
Yeah, sure. just mainly for, I guess, for Squire specifically, is that when doing the research too, I also wanted to highlight, well, looking through the Virginia Gazette ads, it just made me think that obviously that he would know about people being hired out, people being sold through the grapevine of his community, other people talking, either enslavers or members of enslaved community. But there's also a possibility that he could have, because he knew how to read, he could have read these entries in the Virginia Gazette. Because I know it's obviously hearing about it is one thing, but being able to read, being able to see the full context of your loved ones, of your friends, of your community being torn apart from you, it's just, I feel like that would be, um, I can only imagine what he'd have to deal with. I know, depending on what his task was, if he was in the house, he could have he could have read it for leisure, or he could have snuck a peek of it, or maybe someone in his same community could have brought him a newspaper for him to read to them. Do not know exactly what happened there. Anything could have happened there. And then also for mainly for Sarah, I just also wanted to, I know for Hannah, I also wanted to kind of emphasize that for within the letter, at least to me, with my understanding of it, is that Nicholas viewed the Bray School as an as a, excuse me, as an institution where he can instill his ideas of how enslaved people should act. And once Hannah left the school, she was able to mingle with members of her community, just her other enslaved people. And I felt that Nicholas positively viewed them as having a bad influence on her. And just that we see that Hannah was able to escape the confines of that. She was able to, as I mentioned earlier, define herself in her own way. It's just I'm not. I only assume that he's lamenting her, the other enslaved people's influence on her, mainly because of how much he tried to keep Bray School scholars separate from other enslaved people. I mean, that's why I viewed it as that way. As we saw with Sarah, both in the legal context and with the tasks that she might have been assigned.
Right. I think with your research in terms of Hannah, the description of her as a sad jade, we see in the runaway ads in the earlier part of your presentation, it just tells us, I think it tells us that slavery was not the all-encompassing, all-controlling institution that individuals of the time imagined it or certainly desired it to be. What do you think about that?
I certainly agree. I certainly agree. It's just that we see them seeking freedom in their own way, either through running away, through rebelling against a doctrine imposed on you for you to stay loyal to your master or slave owner, whoever. Um, I most definitely agree. We see that despite assuming Virginia transitioning to a slave-based society, despite the emerging rigidity of the race-based hierarchy of the slave system, we see that the enslaved try to maintain their liberty in however way they can. Especially as we can see for George, he's from the Gold Coast. He knows what freedom is like. Whereas for many of the Bray School students or any Virginia-born enslaved people, all they knew was bondage. Would you have someone who survived the Middle Passage, who had a life being a free person and being subject to the slave system? And we also see within two, I can go back to the advertisement if you all would like me to return to it, if it's necessary.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah, if that works for you.
Okay, back to it. Yeah, as we see here, we still see him saying that he doesn't understand why they run away. He says he treats them well. He says he makes sure that they're not mistreated by the overseers. It's just that he just is simply Nicholas is simply dumbfounded that why could they run away from me? But it's just, doesn't seem to understand that any person would want a taste of freedom, by how any means that they can get it. You know.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think also in that slide, you mentioned that there seems to be at least I don't want to call it, maybe we could call it protection, but
Yeah,
seemingly having at least some family units, but
yeah,
your
we do.
slide makes reference to family units being sold together. Can you talk about how that shifts in your research or shifts in terms of how you understand things happening beyond that point?
Sure. Which will highlight this 1793 sale. Notice how we often see, especially for people sold well, we see families being sold in this list. We see for Hannah and 2 children, and below her, Cambridge, Maureen, Esther, possibly husband, wife, and child. Um, I noticed that pretty early on, and with Wilson Carey, I think he was a kind of an outlier because even in the midst of the 19th century, he still tried to keep family units together while he's selling people. Whereas for other enslavers, by the time of the 19th century, we see, yeah, by the time rise of the 18th century, sorry, 19th century, we see the rise of the cotton gin, we see the Louisiana Purchase, and we see the development of the internal slave trade. As slave traders, they did not care about keeping people in family units. They wanted to sell as many people as possible down south because that's where all the money was, with these sugar plantations in Louisiana, with all these cotton plantations in Mississippi and Alabama. We see the Mississippi River essentially replace the Atlantic as the main waterway of enslaved African Americans, especially since in 1808, the United States legally ended the transatlantic slave trade of receiving enslaved people from Africa legally. Obviously, we know with the Clotilda, people still did it illegally. But we see how, as this internal slave trade developed, family units they didn't care about selling people in family units. They wanted to sell as many people as possible to make a profit.
Absolutely. I don't see any more questions in the chat.
Maureen, if I could make a comment.
Absolutely.
I'm
Please.
tired of typing. Tyler, thank you so much for humanizing the scholars that you presented tonight. Your words on Robert Carter Nicholas being dumbfounded that they would run away actually humanized him.
Sorry.
Maybe not in a great way, but it made it made a little bit of sense why he would think Hannah was a sad Jane, because her, I would have to do some research to see what that comment actually would have meant in the 18th century, but that could have been her way of resistance and resilience. You can control what you do with me physically, but you can't control my mind. And I appreciate you. You did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jeanette.
Right. Anyone else this evening? If not, I would like to thank you all again for joining us for the July edition of Bray School Stories. We will reconvene next month. We are typically the last Monday of the month. So our August Bray School Stories will be August 25th at 6 p.m. You will see opportunities to register for that in the future. As always, we encourage you to visit our website, wm.edu/Bray Lab for the Woman Mary Bray School Lab. And we thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Tyler, for all the work that you put in to get us to this point, to tonight's presentation. And thank you in advance for all the work that you will be doing going forward. We're happy that you're staying with us through the NIAD program. And we wish everyone a great evening. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.